Universities teach us many things. And in many areas, universities are just very, very good at what they do. But they also teach us a few bad things as well. For example, professors teach you how to write boring. In the world of business, we cannot afford to be boring and act like cures for insomnia. So today what I like to do is I like to tell you how to design fairly short messages, for example, posts, emails, and things like that. And actually it's a three-step process. First of all, a bit of design. Secondly, you go ahead and create. And third, you just go ahead and proof. So in terms of design, my view is that before you start writing, there's a couple things that you need to do. Actually, three things that you want to do. So the first one is you need to have a belief or an understanding or an outcome in mind on what you want your audience to do. So when we're writing in a business setting, usually the two outcomes of interest are number one, to inform, and secondly, to take action. And of the two, a lot of marketing is all about getting people to take action. In other words, to buy something. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to look at the idea of motivation. But even in a normal business setting, for example, if you send an email out and it has an attachment and your action is for them to read, then you have to think very carefully about how to motivate them to take that type of action. One of the things that's always kind of interesting to me is in the area of corporate training. A lot of times when I was doing that, it would turn out that I'd walk in the very first day and a fair amount of people actually didn't want to be there. So I used to call this the hostile training audience. And one of the reasons people were rather hostile is that HR didn't really think about how to motivate them in terms of wanting to be at that particular training session. So we have number one, be sure to have a sure understanding of your action. Again, either inform or to do some other thing like purchase or buy. And secondly, think really hard about motivation. How can I motivate them to take that action? And the last thing I believe you want to do before you get started in actually writing is actually kind of in your own mind, kind of think out a little bit about what you want to say. So some people might actually do an outline. In research papers, as an example, we highly recommend that you would actually do an outline and write out formal, but at least in your own mind, have a kind of a feel for what you want to say before you start writing. All right, that takes us to the very next step, which is the idea of creation. In my view, there's two kind of major processes we can use. First one, the keyboard. And to be honest with you, I've never been that good when it comes to keyboard. When I remember taking a typing class when I was in high school, and I'll swear I was in the bottom part of the curve that made the top half of the curve possible. Not only did I make a lot of mistakes, but I also was rather slow. So I kind of have because we say that men are rather clumsy when it comes to fine hand eye movement, I've often started to think a lot more about another alternative way. And the way I like to do my writing today is lie back on a couch, have my smartphone in my hand, and then turn on a voice to text program like Siri. So rather than using the keyboard, I'll just compose verbally, and then the software will convert my voice to the text. And it's actually is a pretty good way I found to be able to get things done. It gives you a pretty good first draft. So the software is getting really, really good. Microsoft has a really nice dictation service built into Word. So the two major ways that we create, in my view, are still based on keyboard. And the second one is voice to text. Finally, everyone, my view is that we need to prove. So my personal belief is no one does great writing. No one writes really well. No one's first draft is really awesome. I hate to say it, it's not. It's probably pretty bad. Now, there are rumored to be people that can write really well on a first draft. An example was General Douglas MacArthur, who was a general in the Pacific Theater, 5 stars, and he was rumored to be able to compose letters, by hand, perfect, perfect. In other words, to be able to say exactly what he wanted uh, as he wrote it the first time. But very rarely can any of us do that. So what we need to do is we need to proof it in some way. So we got the first revision. In my view, either the first revision or the second revision, we probably should proof it. Now, today, again, we have software tools. And if any of you have started to use Grammarly, I would actually highly recommend it because it's actually fairly decent in picking out standard mistakes in writing. And as time goes on, it gets better. I know we've all seen it in YouTube because it just seems like it comes up all the time. But again, it's actually a fairly decent way to proof if you're not very good at it. And the second thing that I would highly recommend with really good writing is that you do second revisions after aging, third revision after aging. And what I mean by that is like wine, your writing gets better when you allow it to age a little bit. So you go back to something you've written maybe a day after you first did the previous revision. And then you might go back after, look at it again in a few more hours. So I like the principle of aging, everyone. I will tell you right now in student writing, especially long form writing like research paper, you can always tell the person that does the all-nighter. I'm really serious. You can always tell. It's always bad, always bad. It never works very well. It's like stream of consciousness, actually, and so it makes kind of no sense, paragraph to paragraph to paragraph and so on and so forth. So I would highly recommend, especially those of you doing long form, but even on your short form messaging, like emails, social media posts and things like that. You do a little bit, get it done, get something done, and then go back to it. Okay, so please remember, everyone, nothing done is ever perfect the first time. And you may wonder about this image. This image is actually from a Gutenberg Bible, believe it or not. Gutenberg was a guy who invented something called the printing press. And so in our minds, maybe we think of it as actually black and white, but it actually wasn't. It was actually full color. So in my view, again, very few people can write something perfect the first time. Usually we have to go back 2 times, 3 times, and possibly even more. Let me close with a real quick story, everyone. And this is a true story shared to us by one of our former presidents, whose name was Jimmy Carter. And you may not remember his presidency, but he actually was a military officer. He was in the Navy. He started as an ensign, and he was interviewing to work for a job for an admiral by the name of Hyman Rickover. Rickover was actually a pretty powerful individual at that time in the Navy, and he had a project, and his project was basically the nuclear submarine. So Carter was going to try to impress him and do his best so that he could work for him and learn from him. So Rickover gave him an assignment, a research project to write. Carter comes back after about a week, and Rickover asks, "Is this the best you can do?" And Carter thought about it for a moment and said, "No, it's not." So Rickover told him, "Okay, go back and do it again." About a week later, the ensign comes into the admiral's office a second time and the admiral says, "Is this the best you can do?" And Carter thought again for a moment and said, "No, I guess it isn't. I guess I could do better." And so Rickover said, "Okay, do it again." So a few more days later, Carter comes back. Rickover asks him, "Is this the best you can do?" Carter says, "Yes, it is." And then Rickover says, "Great. Now I'll read it." So when we think about writing, everyone, think about the idea that we have to sometimes do it once or twice or possibly 3 times the same message to be able to get it into a place where it should be read.